Hey, what's going on guys, TurtyWurty here, and welcome back to another Minecraft modding tutorial for version 1.15. In this tutorial I'm going to be going over how you can create a tile entity renderer. So this is just going to be a basic one, and it is basically going to be an item pedestal. So you will put the item in the slot and it will render an item on top of the block, which will spin. So it's pretty easy to do. We just need to create a tile entity, container, a GUI and stuff as normal. So let's go ahead and do that. So first we need to obviously go ahead and register our block, and we can do that in block init. So let's just come down here, let's do public static final registry object, and that will be a block. And we'll just call this item underscore pedestal, pedestal. That's going to be equal to blocks.register item underscore pedestal, and the supplier is a new item pedestal block, and I will do block.properties from blocks.anvil for my properties. Okay, and now we can go ahead and create that item pedestal class. As normal, this class will just extend block, and we can just add the normal constructor. Okay, and then we just want to override the method hasTileEntity, and you need to make sure this method takes in block state, otherwise it is the deprecated method and that just won't work. And then we want the createTileEntity method, and this will just return our mod tile entity types .itemPedestal.get.create. We will obviously go ahead and create that in a minute. And then we want the onBlock activated method, in which we will first check that the world is not remote, and then we will get the tile at the pos. We'll then check if that tile entity is an instance of our tile entity class. If it is, then we want to use the networkhooks.openGUI method. In here we will first cast a server player entity to the player, and then we will cast our tile entity class to tile, and finally we will put in the pos. And after that we will return action result type.success, and outside of this if statement here we will return action result type.fail. Then we want to go ahead and override the onReplaced method. In here we want to first check that the state.getBlock is not equal to the new state.getBlock. Then we want to get the tile entity at the pos. Then we want to check that the tile is instance of our tile entity. If it is, then we want to use the method inventoryHelper.dropItems. This will take in the world, the pos, and then it will be our tile entity casted to tile, and then we'll use the .getItems method on that. Okay, now that is it for our block class, so we can go ahead and close that, just import it in our block init. And now we can go over to our tile entity init, and we can go ahead and register that. So we first want to create a public static final registry object. This will obviously be tile entity type, and that will take in our tile entity class. I'm just going to call this item underscore pedestal, and it's going to be equal to tile entity types.register. This will first take in the name, which is going to be item underscore pedestal, and then the supplier, which is just a normal supplier, and then tile entity type.builder.create. This will first take in the factory, which is just our tile entity class : new, and then the valid blocks will be our block from block init. You need to make sure you put .get on this, otherwise it will be a registry object and not a block. Outside of that bracket we want .build, and that will take in null. Okay, now we have done that, we can go ahead and create the tile entity class. Now for this class we have several options. We can either extend lockable loot tile entity, or we can do what I am going to do and just make it be a normal tile entity and handle the slot stuff ourselves, as that is a bit easier. So we are just going to extend tile entity. We are going to implement iClearable, also iNamed container provider. First thing we're going to do is add the default constructor, and then we'll have another constructor. Inside of here we will have this, and that will take in our tile entity that we initialized in mod tile entity types. Actually, my bad, we need to go ahead and still extend lockable loop tile entity. This is because otherwise it won't be able to save the item when you exit the GUI. It will, it's just easier if you extend lockable loop tile entity. We're going to create an array list of slots, and then we need to create a protected non-null list of item stack, and that will be the items field, and that will be equal to non-null list.withSize, and that will take in 1 and item stack.empty. The reason we are setting this to 1 is because that is how many slots we have, and we are setting item stack.empty because that is what we want to default the item stack to. Then we want to go ahead and override the read and write methods. In the read method, we want to initialize this.items, setting that to non-null list.withSize. This will first take in this.getSize inventory. It will be item stack.empty, and then we are going to call item stack helper.load all items. This will just take in compound and also this.items. In here we want to call item stack helper.save all items. This will take in compound and this.items. In fact, we can go ahead and remove this slots field up here, as we won't be using that. Then we want to override these two methods, get items and set items. Get items will return this.items. In set items, we want to do this.items, and that will be equal to items in. Next, we want to override the mark dirty method. In here we want to do this.world.notify block update. First take in this.getPos, then it will take in this.getBlockState, and then it will take in this.getBlockState again, and then it will take in constants block flags .block update. Then we want to override this method, get default name, and in here we want to return a new translation text component, container dot, and then plus our mod ID, so tutorial mod.mod ID, plus and then item underscore pedestal. Then we want to override the create menu method, which we will just leave for now until we have created our container. Then we want to override get size inventory. In here we will return this.items.size. Then we will override the method isEmpty. In here we will have a for loop which loops through all the item stacks in this.items. In here we will check that the item stack is not empty. If it's not empty, we want to return false. And if it is empty, we want to return true. Then we want to override the method getStackInSlot. In here we will return this.items.get, and that will take in the index. Then we will override decrease stack size. In here we will return item stack helper.get and split. That will first take in this.items, then the index, and then the count. Then we will override remove stack from slot, in which we will return item stack helper.get and remove. We'll take in this.items and index. Then we will override the method set inventory contents, in which we will first get the item stack at the index. Then we will create this boolean called flag. This will first check if the stack is not empty, and it will check that the stack is equal to this item stack, and finally it will check that the tags in the stack are equal. And then we want to do this.items.set, and that will take in index and stack. Then we want to check if the stack.getCount is greater than this.getInventory stack limit. If it is, then we want to do stack.setCount, and that will take in this.getInventory stack limit. Then we'll have another if statement where we will check not flag, and if not flag we will do this.markDirty. Then we will override the method isUsableByPlayer, in which we will first check if the tile entity at the position is not equal to this. If it's not, then we obviously want to return false. And else we want to do some maths to check that the distance is correct. So we can return player.getDistance squared. Here we will cast a double to this.pos.getX plus 0.5. Then we will do that for the Y and the Z. And we will check that that is less than or equal to 64. Then we will override the method isItemValidForSlot. Now you don't need to override this method, but what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to return, I'm going to basically check if the stack is damaged or not. So I only want it to be able to be in the pedestal if it's not damaged, but obviously you don't need to override this method if you don't want any conditions on that. Then we want to override this clear method, in which we will do super.clear, and then we will call this.items.clear. We'll override getUpdate packet, in which we will first create a new compound MBT, and then we'll call this.write, and that will take in MBT, and then we'll return a new sUpdate tile entity packet, take in this.getPos. It will take in 1 and MBT. Then we can override onData packets, in which we will call this.read, and that will take in packet.getMBT compound. Then we'll override getUpdate tag, in which we will return this.write, and that will take in a new compound MBT. Then we'll have the method handleUpdate tag, in which we will just call this.read, and that takes in the tag. Now we can go into our container init and create a public static final registry object. This will obviously be of container type, and that will take in our container class. And that is going to be equal to container types.register. This will first be the name, which is just going to be item_pedestal, and then a supplier, which is iForge container type.create, and this will just take in the container class : new. Now we can go ahead and create this container class. This is just going to extend container, and in here we'll create a field for our tile entity, which will be final. Then we want a private final iWorldPos callable. Then we can create the constructor, and this will take in a final window ID. Then it will take in a final player inventory, and we'll call that player inventory. And then it will take in our tile entity. And then we will just super off of our init line in mod container types, and also the window ID. And then we will initialize the tile entity variable, and we will initialize the can interact with callable, and that will be equal to iWorldPos callable.of. First take in tile entity.getWorld, and also tile entity.getPos. Then we'll create a private static getTileEntity method, and that will return our tile entity class. This will take in the player inventory and a packet buffer. In here we'll do objects.require non-null. We'll require the player inventory, for that we'll just put player inv cannot be null. And then we'll do the same for data, and then we'll get the tile entity at the pos from the data.readBlockPos, and then we check that the tile at pos is instance of our tile entity. If it is, we want to return our tile entity casted to tile at pos, and if not, we want to return we want to throw a new illegal state exception. and then in here we'll just put tile entity is not correct plus tile at pos, and then we can create another constructor. This will first take in the final int window ID. It will also take in the player inventory and the packet buffer, and this will, in here we'll do this, and that will take in window ID, player inventory, and the get tile entity method. Then we can override the method can interact with, in which we'll return is within usable distance. We'll first take in the can interact with callable, then the player, and then the block. Then we want the transfer stack in slot method. Here we'll first create an item stack, which will be item stack.empty. Then we'll create slot, and that is equal to this.inventory slot.getIndex. Then you want to check that the slot is not equal to null and slot.getHasStack. If that is true, then we want to get the stack at the slot, and then we want to set item stack to itemStack1.copy. Then we want to check that the index is less than 1. If it is, then we want to do another if statement, and that will take in this.merge item stack. That will take in item stack 1, this.inventory slots.size, and true. Actually, you need to make sure this has an exclamation mark before it, because we want to do not. And if that is true, then we want to return item stack.empty. And else if not this.merge item stack, and that can take in item stack 1, 0, 1, and false. And if that is true, we want to return item stack.empty again, and then we want to check if it's empty. Then we want to do slot.putStack, and we want to put in item stack.empty. Else we want to call slot.onSlotChanged, and finally we want to go ahead and return item stack. In the constructor just below this, we want to go ahead and look at the main inventory first. So first we will do the one slot. Here is my texture. I will bring it over and I'll show you how to do the math for this. So we need to find the top right of this. So as you can see, the slot that I have is 24 by 24. So we need to find the 16 by 16. So it's 22 by 22. That's 19 by 19. 20 by 20, I mean. And that is 18 by 18. And that is 16 by 16. So this pixel right there is the right one. So that is 81 and 36. So if I just come over here, we can do this dot add slot. That will be a new slot. That will take in the tile entity. Then the index is just 0, and then it is the start X, which as we can see was 81. And then it is the start Y, which is 36. Then we need to go ahead and do the main inventory as well. So let's just add a comment for main inventory. In here we are first going to declare the start X of this inventory. So if we come over to our GUI right here, we can see that the first top left one is 8 and 84. So we can create an int for the start X, which will be 8. And then we'll create an int for the start Y, which will be 84. And then we'll create an int for slot size plus 2, which will be equal to 18. And then we'll do a for loop for the 3 rows. And then we'll create a for loop for the 9 columns. And then we'll do this dot add slot, and this will take in a new slot. It will be the player inv. The index is 9 plus row times 9 plus column. And then the X position is the start X. and then that will be plus in brackets column times slot size plus 2. And for the Y position, it will be start Y plus, and then in brackets row times slot size plus 2. And then we will create an integer for the hotbar Y, and we will set that to the first Y position of the hotbar, which as we can see is 142. And then we can create a for loop for the 9 columns, and then we can call this.add slot, which takes in a new slot. That will first take in the player inv, then it will take in column as the index. For the for the X position, it is start X plus, and then in brackets column times slot size plus 2. For the Y position, it is just the hotbar Y. Now we have the screen class, we can go ahead and extend container screen, and that will take in our container class. In here we first want to create a resource location for the background texture, and that is equal to a new resource location which first takes in our mod ID, and then textures /GUI, and then our GUI texture. And then we need to add the constructor. In here we will first set the GUI left and the GUI top. By default those should both be set to 0. And then we need to set the X size and the Y size that we want it to draw. So if I go into here and I check how big it is, so just select the whole thing, and we see down here 176 by 166. So if I now go into here, I can do this.x size is 176 and this.y size is 166. Then we can go ahead and override the render method and just change these parameters around so that these are first final. All of these need to be final. In here you just want to call this.render background and also this.render hovered tooltip. Then we want to override the draw GUI container foreground layer, and in here we just want to draw the strings, which are the names of the GUIs, and we can do that by doing this.font.drawString. First will be the text, which is going to be this.title.getFormatted_text. Now the X that we are going to draw that at, if we just go and look in our GUI, we can see we want to probably draw it maybe like here. So if we just grab that position, that is 7 and 6. So actually let's move that there, which is 8 and 6. Actually I'm just going to draw it at 8 and 8 because that makes more sense. So 8.0f and 8.0f, and then the color, which by default is 4210.752. And then we want to do the same for the player inventory, and as you can see I just have put the sizes in there for where it needs to be. Then you want to override the draw GUI container background layer. In here we are first going to do render system.color4f, and that will take in 4 floats which are all 1.0f. Those 4 floats are just for red, green, blue and alpha. After you have done that, you can do this.minecraft.getTextureManager .bind texture, and that will take in our background texture. And then we can create 2 variables, int x and int y, and those will be equal to this.width or this.height, negative this.x size or this.y size, and both of those divided by 2, so those values will obviously be done respectively. And then we want to call this.blit. That will first take in the x position and the y position, and then it will take in 0, 0, and then it will take in this.x size and this.y size. If you guys are interested, if you look in my GitHub, link in the description, most of this code will probably be commented. I will go through and comment it all after I have recorded this tutorial, just so it's a little bit easier to understand what stuff does, because I know it can be a bit complicated just looking at all this here, but trust me, it's all very easy stuff, and it's not really what you need to be worrying about anyways. Now that we have done that, we need to go ahead and bind the GUI to the container, and obviously we want to do that in our client area. So here we go, we are in our client event bus, and here where we have screen manager.register factory, we just want that again. This will first take in our container from mod container types, and then the screen factory, which is just our screen class : new. Now obviously if you are following this tutorial without having followed the chess tutorial, you need to go into your main class and make sure you have put mod tile entity types.register and mod container types.register in the constructor after you have registered your blocks. Otherwise you will have some issues there. Now if we go back into our client event bus, we need to go ahead and do the binding of the tile entity renderer. So if we just come down at the bottom, we can call client registry.bind tile entity renderer. This will first take in the tile entity type, and then it will take in the tile entity renderer class : new. As you can see, that is a very long class name, but that's just how it is. Alternatively, you could just call it item pedestal renderer, which is actually what I'm going to do now I think about it. Then in our client package, we're going to want a new package, and that will just be called tileentity.renderer. And in here we will create this renderer class. This class will extend tileEntityRenderer, and this will take in the tileEntity class. Firstly, I am going to create a private float, and I am going to call that degrees. Now that is the variable I am going to be using to increment the motion. Then I am going to have the constructor, in which I am just going to set degrees to 0. Now the method in this class that you use to do all the rendering is called the render method, so we can just go ahead and override that. In here we are first going to get the items, and then what we want to do is we want to do a for loop for all the stacks in this list, and we want to check that the stack is not empty. If it's not, then we can do matrix stack.push. We can go ahead and create the render item method. So this is actually the method that will render the item. So that will be a private void, and we will call that render item. This will first take in the item stack, then it will take in the partial ticks, then it will take the matrix stack, then it will take in an iRender type buffer, then it will take in an int, which is the combined light in, and then it will take in another int, which is the combined overlay in. I am just going to give this class the @onlyInDis.client. This is because we want to make sure we're not doing any rendering on the server, because obviously that won't work. And then in this method we are going to do Minecraft.getInstance.renderItem. This first takes in the stack, then it takes transformType.fixed, then the combined light, the combined overlay, the matrix stack, and the buffer. As you can see, this has a deprecation on it, but that's fine. It's not replaced by anything, so we can just add that there. In fact, we can just suppress the class, so otherwise we will have an error up there. Now that we have done that, we can go ahead and call the render item. You do need to make sure you have done matrix stack.pop at the end and push at the start, otherwise none of this will do anything. Okay, now that you have done that, you should be able to run the game. This might take me a bit of testing just to fix this up, because I doubt this will be exactly right. But yeah, we will have to see. Okay, so guys, I am now in the game. It has been a while. I've had a few issues, basically just trying to get the animation to play a bit better. It was playing really off, it was very glitchy, but I managed to do some. Actually, I will show you. Let's go into the class item pedestal renderer. If we go here in the render method, you can see how I've done it. So I have a translate here, which is what makes it go up and down, and that uses the current time. And then we also have it rotating with the degrees incremented divided by 2, and I will show you what that does. So I will grab my example seeds. We just place it down. As you can see, the slot is there. It is fully interactable. As you can see, it's there. Obviously, if you wanted to scale it down, you can. It does seem a bit big. Is it big? Or does it just look big? No, that's very big. I don't know why it's so big. I think it's just scaled to the size of the block. It might do that, so obviously you can scale it down, and it stays in there. When I leave the world, it should stay in there. This is where it probably won't, and I'll cry. But it should stay in there when I reload the world. So yeah, it rotates, it bobs up and down. It's pretty good. I did have an issue. I will tell you this. I did have an issue where it was showing up dark, like really dark, and basically I fixed that. Well, the issue was I actually had, well, there was two issues. I had the block taller than 16 cubes, and also it didn't have a texture or block state or model, and both of those things caused it to break. And I also added overlay texture.no overlay instead of the combined overlay. So actually I can get rid of that combined overlay entirely because I'm not using that. Well, it's debug mode. Continue. And yeah, that was basically causing some issues, but yeah, I mean, anything can go in here. I can put the pedestal itself in there. What else can I put in? I mean, you can put anything in here. Put bamboo in there. It's very big. I don't know why it is coming out so big. Blocks in there. Probably because the item renderer for items isn't fully fleshed out. So. But yeah, it's there, it works, it's great. So yeah, I will be having another tutorial on tile entity renderers soon, and that will be actually animating the block itself rather than having an item go on top. So yeah, if you guys did enjoy this tutorial, please do be sure to smash your face into that like button and subscribe. If you really enjoyed, please do be sure to share it. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.